Hello, my name is Lynn Parmenter and I am a professor at Nazarbayev University Graduate School of Education. Today I'm going to be talking about global skills. I'm actually recording this in Japan, if you're wondering about the background. So I'm sending this presentation from Japan on behalf of NU GSE. What I'm going to talk about today are global skills, and I'm going to divide it into these sections. So first of all, I'll talk a little about defining global skills, then about describing global skills, and then talk a little bit about developing global skills in the classroom. And then there will be a slide giving further reading and resources, and finally some discussion questions for you to discuss in your groups. So first of all, defining global skills. I'm sure you've probably heard one of these terms on this slide. So something like soft skills, core skills or competencies, deep learning skills or competencies, 21st century skills or competencies, and there are other different terms as well. These all tend to refer to a similar kind of thing. And these skills combined with global awareness, knowledge, understanding, and outlook are what I am referring to as global skills. And these are the skills that are necessary for young people as they grow up in the 21st century in a globalized world, and they need to be developing these skills and competencies so that they, in their futures, can deal with people from other cultures, other countries, whether it's by going abroad and literally moving somewhere else, or whether it's in their own country, in their own, living room, in their own study, in their own office, through the internet or whatever. So these skills are relevant to everybody, to every child, to every young person, as they grow up in a globalized world. Now, in this presentation, I'll use the term global skills, but please, do keep in mind that other terms like soft skills, deep learning skills, core skills can be used in a very, very similar way. So there's a lot of overlap between these definitions. Now, there are various taxonomies of these skills. They're organized in different ways, but generally they include similar skills and competencies. For example, Greenstein, in a book about 21st century skills, has integrated various different frameworks into the following categories. Thinking, and you almost always have critical thinking is always part of these skills. Problem solving, creating, metacognition, being able to reflect on your thinking and think about how you are thinking, basically. Acting, communicating is very important. Communicating across cultures is important. Collaborating, in a small group, in a bigger group, in your immediate environment, but also in a much wider environment. Digital literacy, technology literacy, so being able to get the information you need, knowing what to do with it, and so on. And then flexibility and adaptability, initiative and self-direction. So those personal attributes that young people need in order to be able to cope with the change in a globalized world. It's no longer the case that a young person will leave school, will go into a job, and they will be there in that job for the rest of their life. That now, or from now, is probably the exception rather than the rule. So young people need to develop this flexibility and adaptability to be able to cope with change, to be able to redirect themselves if they decide to go on a different path, to be able to decide what they want to do and what they need to do and what they need to be able to do in order to do what they want to do. So all those aspects are also part of these skills. And then living in the world, civic responsibility and citizenship. So how do we live in a community? How do we live in a society? Global understanding. Understanding what the world is all about. Understanding, our own place in the world. How the world is changing. How the world is linked to us, and how different parts of the world are linked to each other. Leadership and responsibility. So being able to take different roles in a group, including being able to lead, being able to make decisions and so on. And college and career readiness. So young people need to make some very major decisions when they're still at a young age, helping them to be able to do that, helping them to be ready to make those decisions about their future, and about a future that is not certain, about a future that will require flexibility and adaptability. So this is one taxonomy, if you like, of those skills, and this is amalgamated from different frameworks. The OECD is also very interested in global skills and competencies, and they have developed a conceptual framework for including assessment of global competence in PISA 2018. Now, this is just a proposal. This was published in 2016. This is a proposal for assessment of global competence in PISA 2018. And the way they define global competence is as written here. So global competence is the capacity to analyze global and intercultural issues critically, again, critical thinking, and from multiple perspectives. So not just one way, but being able to see it in different ways. To understand how differences affect perceptions, judgments, and ideas of self and others, and to engage in open, appropriate, and effective interactions with others from different backgrounds on the basis of a shared respect for human dignity. So again, you've got that intercultural aspect. You have to be able to engage with and interact with people who are different from you. And that's a very important aspect of global skills. And this is the conceptual framework that they have developed within this proposal for including global competence in PISA. So they're talking about cognitive components, so skills, analytical and critical thinking. So they are already assessed in the cognitive test, which includes the ability to interact respectfully, appropriately, and effectively. Empathy. You don't have to feel the same as somebody else, but you have to be able to understand how they feel and try to understand why they feel that way. And flexibility, as I mentioned before. Then you have knowledge and understanding. So knowledge and understanding of global issues, and not just global issues, but of how Kazakhstan fits into the world, of how your particular region in Kazakhstan links with the world, and so on. So all those relationship aspects are very important. And intercultural knowledge and understanding. So different people think in different ways, believe different things, have different ways of seeing, and that is perfectly normal. So being able to understand that, and of course you cannot know everything about every culture, but being aware that interculturally you need to understand and you need to know certain things in order to be able to interact effectively with other people. And then they're planning for self-reporting in the PISA student questionnaire about attitudes. So this would include openness towards people from other cultures, respect for cultural otherness, global-mindedness, and responsibility. So again, these are intercultural aspects, the openness and the respect for cultural otherness. and then the global citizenship aspects of global mindedness and responsibility. So these are all the components that they identify, and then the values. These underpinning all of these are the values of valuing human dignity and valuing cultural diversity. And OECD says this will lead to global competence. So if this does come into PISA in 2018, this is what they are talking about. Now, another model is the British Council Core Skills Model. And this is used for teacher professional development in many countries around the world. And this framework has 6 core skills. Some of them combine 2 into 1. Critical thinking and problem solving, creativity and imagination, communication and collaboration, digital literacy, citizenship, and student leadership. And you can see here that some of these reflect back. We already saw some of these before. We saw the critical thinking, we saw communication before, digital literacy before. So this is what I mean when you say all these models have overlap with each other. And any model that you find, any framework that you find will have similar kind of skills in it. Now, this is the one that I am going to use for the rest of the presentation. Because it's fairly clear, it's six different things, and it does include most of the aspects that the other models include. The other advantage of this particular model is that it was written specifically for teacher professional development. So what has happened is they've developed all these modules. So you can see you've got an introduction to core skills, and then you have all the separate modules. You've got it's not come out completely, but creativity and imagination, critical thinking and problem solving, digital literacy, communication and collaboration, student leadership, etc. So there are modules for each of them after your introduction to core skills. And all of these are free. So if you are interested in this whole idea of global skills, core skills, and you want to do more about this, you can access this from the British Council website, and you can do these online courses. They are free to teachers. You have to register first, but then they are free to teachers. And each module contains a lot of the basic ideas about the core skill, but also gives a lot of ideas for actually implementing it in your classroom. So they are useful in that way. So I'm going to use those 6 areas of core skills to go on to the next section, which is describing global skills. So the first one was critical thinking and problem solving. And what I just want to do in each of these sections is break it down a little bit. So go into a bit more detail about what each of these core skills involves. This is not an exclusive list. It's not a comprehensive list. You could keep adding more and more and more. So you will notice that each one finishes with etc. Because of course there are more skills in each category here. But these are just a few of the key ones to give you an idea of what each of these areas, each of these categories involves. So critical thinking and problem solving involves skills such as analyzing issues from different perspectives. This is a key thing in critical thinking and in problem solving. But you have to be able to think from different viewpoints. So not just, this is how I have always done it, so this is how I will do it now. Or this is what so-and-so says, so I will do it this way. But being able to take different perspectives. And of course, if you expand that to global skills, then you're saying, well, here, me, a teacher in Kazakhstan, I see this issue in this way. But perhaps somebody else, a policymaker in Kazakhstan, may see it a different way. a teacher in Australia may see it a different way. So being able to think about those different perspectives and analyze an issue from different perspectives is part of critical thinking. Of course, critical thinking also involves finding sound evidence to support your ideas and arguments. You can't just say, I think this, and so it's right, you know, and children need to learn that I think that because I like that, or I think that because I like that idea. So it's that process of learning to say, well, why do you think that? What's the evidence for thinking that? And that whole process that children need to learn to go through in order to be able to think critically. Another aspect is analyzing how things relate to each other. You know, sometimes the way that the school curriculum is set up in a lot of ways, students don't necessarily see how subjects are related to each other, for example, or how ideas are related to each other. And so part of critical thinking is being able to see how things relate to each other, how ideas relate to each other, how facts, how trends, how, you know, various different aspects relate to each other. Once you've found your evidence, you have to evaluate your evidence, and you have to have sound criteria to evaluate your evidence. And obviously STEM subjects in particular have a very big role in developing this skill, because this is part of what science is all about. You know, you have your criteria and you evaluate your evidence. So these are skills that children need to learn as well. One big aspect of critical thinking and problem solving is knowing how to approach an unfamiliar problem. And this is something that is quite difficult, and it's something that PISA tests as well. But it's quite easy it's easier to educate children to approach familiar problems. If you have this problem, you do it in this way. But critical thinking and problem solving, sometimes what you need to do is think of how to approach it in a different way. So giving children those opportunities to try to think about unfamiliar problems, to think of ways to approach those unfamiliar problems, is a good way of developing critical thinking and problem solving. And following on from that, identifying problems and thinking of multiple possible solutions. So in schools in general, teachers provide the problems. This is the problem, how are you going to solve it? Or this is the problem, this is how we are going to solve it. But it's also necessary, one of the necessary skills to develop is actually identifying the problems. And this is part of critical thinking. Making decisions about the best solution in a particular situation. This is an important part of problem solving, obviously. So you've got multiple possible solutions in any situation. How do you make a decision about what's the best solution? Is it always the best solution? Or is it the best solution for that situation, in that context, for that person, for that, you know, particular time, for example? And then putting critical thinking and problem solving into action. So actually turning the thinking, the ideas, into actions on the ground is also part of this skill. Creativity and imagination. The real basic foundation of this is the asking and the thinking. Why? How? What if? It's that intellectual curiosity. And children have this, naturally. I mean, I have 5 children. Every one of them at the age of 3 or 4, they're going, why? Why, mummy? Why? 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 That's intellectual curiosity. But to try to keep that as children grow up, as they go through school, to give them opportunities to keep asking, to keep thinking, why? What if? That is how they develop that creativity and the imagination. Being open to new ideas, new ways of thinking, It depends on personality, of course. Some students are much more open to new ideas than other students are. But it's giving children those opportunities and being the role model as a teacher as well, to be open to those new ideas and ways of thinking. Okay, but there's a different way of thinking about this. If we think in this way, then what? And taking children on that journey of exploring what if. But then going beyond that and developing justification for new ideas as well. So you can't just have ideas going, new idea, new idea, new idea, new idea, new idea, because then they just disappear. They dissolve into nothing. So you have an idea, but you have to follow it through. You have to develop it. And helping children to go through that process of developing their ideas. And then, of course, you have to communicate your ideas. I'll talk about this in a minute more, about communication, but actually communicating what's going on in your imagination is also very important. And again, putting it into action, trying things out. And that's connected with the next one, not being afraid to take risks. You know, it's always easier, especially in schools in most countries, you know, you have the information, you have to do this to get a good mark on the test, you do this and this and this and this. And you don't tend to get rewarded so much for trying out new things and taking risks. But if you want to develop these skills of creativity and imagination, it's important to try out new ways of thinking or doing things. And it's important not to be afraid to take risks. Not stupid risks, of course, but reasonable risks in terms of thinking. And then collaborative creativity. So sharing ideas with others to brainstorm new solutions, new possibilities. And this is where school has a big role, because obviously the students are there with other students all day, every day. And it's the opportunity where they can brainstorm new solutions and possibilities in a class. Now, going on to communication and collaboration. And again, this is two skills in one, of course, but they are connected skills. Now, one of the parts of this one's more difficult for me to speak about. I actually wrote this one for the British Council, so there's a lot of information in my head here. But using oral and written communication for a variety of purposes is an important skill in communication and collaboration, of course. And not only oral and written, of course, you also have sign language. You know? You have non-verbal language, so making children aware of all the different ways that you can communicate is important, and then giving children opportunities to use those different ways of communicating. Then going back to the OECD definition, interacting respectfully, appropriately, and effectively with other people, including people of different age groups and people with different cultures, different ways of thinking. So, you know, it never hurts to respect other people when you communicate with them. That's all, that's a given. Being able to interact appropriately with somebody older, with somebody younger, with somebody who maybe doesn't speak a certain language as well as you do, whatever. Being able to use different languages as appropriate in different contexts. This is where people in Kazakhstan have a big advantage because, you know, a lot of people already are plurilingual and students are growing up being able to speak Kazakh, Russian, some English, and maybe another language or another two languages as well. That's a big advantage when you look at this aspect of communication as a global skill in an international perspective. There are many children in many other countries who are not able to do that. So that's a big advantage. Being open to others and willing to try to communicate, even if it is difficult. So, you know, if you say you get the chance to communicate with somebody in English and somebody's only been learning English for 3 years or not used English for 20 years or whatever, so I can't do it, I can't speak, then you don't develop the communication. So that willingness and the openness to try to communicate, even if language is difficult, is part of this skill of communication. And going more to the collaboration side, working collaboratively in various roles in diverse groups. So not just with your friends, but with people, with different people, working in different roles. So sometimes you may be a leader, sometimes you may be the secretary of a group, sometimes you may be reporting what the group says. So there are all these different roles in different groups, in different situations. So being able to take those different roles within a group. Actively participating in and contributing in a group while valuing the contributions of others. You know, you can have group work and you can have people who don't contribute. Let's all sit down. They're there, they're in the group, they're in the class, but they're not participating, they're not contributing. So the collaboration skills are active participation, active contribution, but not just dominating everything in the group, but also listening to other people, understanding what other people are trying to say, and valuing the contributions of other people, and working flexibly and responsibly to achieve shared goals. So collaboration is about doing something as a shared goal, and taking responsibility for your part of doing that. So these are some of the skills in this communication and collaboration category. Digital literacy. There's a lot of literature on this more recently, you know, as the internet booms and everything. This is actually an area, you know, that very often students know more about than teachers do. And so sometimes on the actual technology side, teachers are learning from students in the classroom to a certain extent. But what's required here in the terms of skills, in digital literacy skills, is identifying what information is required and the best sources to obtain it. So what do I need to know to solve this problem, for example? How am I going to find out? It's those two questions. And then actually searching for information. I mean, the internet is great. You can find anything on the internet. But that's also the disadvantage. You're absolutely overwhelmed by the internet, you know? If you search something, say, you know, United Kingdom, you will get millions of hits. And how do you know? How do you find the right information within that? So it's being able to search for the right information. And then being able to evaluate the quality and usefulness of the information from various sources. There is a lot of good information on the internet. There's a lot of bad information on the internet. So being able to evaluate the quality, that requires critical thinking. It goes back to your critical thinking and your digital literacy. And the relevance, the usefulness for the specific purpose that you are looking for this information. Using that information to support learning. You can acquire a mass of information and collate it, but not necessarily learn anything. So actually using the information for whatever the learning purpose is, the learning outcome. And a very important one that can be quite difficult for students, being able to use sources of information ethically. It is very, very easy to find information about something on Wikipedia, copy, paste. Okay. And students have to know, they have to learn that you cannot do that. It's not ethical. So these questions of academic integrity, questions of, yes, of course, you can use information from other sources, but you have to reference it. You have to say, where did you get that information? Those kind of digital literacy skills are also very, very important. Because school is where students are learning the basic academic integrity that they will take through them for their whole life. And then using technology to communicate effectively with others as well is an important skill. Citizenship. Again, this was in other frameworks as well. Citizenship is defined in different ways in different parts of the world, of course. But in this case, citizenship is being defined as being a citizen of your local community, your nation state, and the global community. Okay, so it's on all those different levels, from the smallest level to being a citizen of your own village or town or whatever, to being a citizen of Kazakhstan, to being a global citizen. So the skills of citizenship include understanding your own position and role in the community, in society, in the wider world. So what am I supposed to be doing here? How do I fit in to this community, to this society? How do I fit into the world? And being willing to take responsibility in that position. So not just to shut yourself off from society, but to take part and to take responsibility. And further, to actively contribute to the well-being of the community and society at various levels. Sometimes it's easy to say, I can't do this, you know, I don't have the influence, I don't have the authority to do it. But one thing, you know, in a lot of recent research on citizenship, more and more it is ordinary people who are making a difference by actively contributing to well-being of community and society. And then there are also the more cognitive skills of analysing how local, national, global issues overlap and intersect, and thinking about how individuals and groups can work for improvement at those different levels of society. And then going to the much more global side of it, respecting diversity at local, national, and global levels, and recognising the importance of working together for the common good. So working for everybody's well-being. So again, here you've got the collaboration aspect coming into this as well. And finally, the final category is student leadership. Now, student leadership can take many forms. It's not just the, you know, the person who has the status of a leader in a particular school or a particular class. Different people can be leaders in different ways. So this is a general term, not just the people, not just students who have an official leadership status, but a general term for anybody who takes that leadership role. And leadership skills here include working with others with a clear vision of a shared goal, and being able to remind other people, this is why we're doing this. Inspiring others, developing confidence in others. That's part of being a leader. Making the most of the strengths of diverse individuals within a group. So if a group is doing a project on science, a science project, for example, and one person is very good at precise things and one person is better at seeing the big picture, then you make the most of the strengths of those individuals in a group. Developing other people's skills and competencies. Of course, not everybody has the same skills and competencies. So if somebody needs help with doing a specific thing, then part of the role of a leader is helping them to develop those skills and competencies. Taking responsibility for planning, implementing, and evaluating action. So not just the planning and implementing, but also leadership involves that evaluation aspect, reflecting. What did we do? What went well? What didn't go so well? What could we improve? Where do we go next? What's the next step? Making decisions that are respected by others because they are based on clear grounds. So everyone understands why that decision was made. Demonstrating integrity. So we already talked about academic integrity, but there's also personal integrity. So demonstrating integrity, being a role model, is part of being a leader. And coping with challenges and difficulties. That's an important part of leadership. Things are not going to go brilliantly all the time. You know, there are always going to be challenges. There will always be difficulties. And part of leadership is being able to say, okay, I didn't expect this to happen. This is a problem. Now what are we going to do? And finding solutions and coping with the challenges and still going forward. Now, moving on to developing global skills. I'd just like to talk a little bit about how to put these into practice in the classroom. Not in great detail, but just briefly. Now, what I want to emphasize here is that the development of global skills does not require extra classroom hours. You know, this is not, we need to find some time for critical thinking, we need to find time for communication, we need to find time for digital literacy, we need to find time for citizenship. The development of global skills is most effective when it's integrated into regular classroom practice. In other words, when teachers are doing it every day in their classes, as part of their teaching, as part of students' learning. And most teachers are already developing global skills. They may not be doing it consciously, but most teachers very naturally do develop these kinds of skills because it's an essential part of education, basically. So this is just one example of the global skills, of how to develop global skills. This is a very, very small scale example. It's just to show how easy it is to develop a whole range of skills, even within a 20-minute activity, 15 minutes, 20 minutes activity. So this is just an example that I made up now of a 4th grade maths class. So you could divide the class into small groups, 3 or 4 students, and you give each group a small piece of paper with an answer on it. And the answer can be anything. 25 sheep, 0.3 centimeters, okay? It doesn't matter. The answer can be anything. But the students, they must not tell other groups what their answer is. Then you give the groups 5 to 10 minutes to write a word question for their answer. So basically, the students have the answer, they have to write the question. So they have to be as creative and as imaginative as possible. They have to make it challenging for other groups. The question has to be challenging, but not impossible. Okay? And each group writes their question on a sheet of paper. Now, when you have these, each group has a sheet of paper with their question written on it. When everyone is ready, each group passes their question on to the next group. So the next group, they have a question and they have to solve that question. So they have 2 or 3 minutes to answer the question, and then they write their answer in their notebooks or whatever. Then they pass the sheet round to the next group, and they get the next sheet and answer a new question. And you keep passing the sheets round each group so that eventually every group answers every question. And then when everyone's done that, then you can start a class discussion on the questions. So which of the questions were difficult? Which ones were easy? Why? Which ones were interesting? How could the questions be better next time, for example? It's a very, very simple activity. You don't need any resources apart from sheets of paper. You just need the students and some paper, that's all. But what you are developing through this activity is you're developing critical thinking and problem solving. So what you're asking students to do is create, develop, communicate a question. So usually students tend to think from question. They're given a question, they have to answer. And this is switching it the other way around. So they get an answer, they have to think of the question. Then they have to solve problems set by other groups. And then critical thinking also through analyzing the activity, evaluating what was good about it, what wasn't, what was interesting, why, and suggesting ways of improving it. But this is all part of critical thinking as well. The creativity and imagination, you're asking students to create original questions, to use their imagination to make the questions interesting, but also understandable for other groups. And communication and collaboration. They have to write the question so that it's clear to other groups. They have to communicate within their group. They have to communicate with other groups. They have to collaborate in their own group to create a question and solve other groups' questions. And student leadership. Within each group, they're assuming roles, they're making decisions within each group. So even in a very, very simple activity like that, you're actually developing these skills and a number of skills. And if you can do this, in most classes, students will quite easily develop these global skills. Further reading and resources. The proposal for PISA Global Competence Assessment, if you're interested, is here. I could not find a Russian version of it yet. I guess there may be at some point, but I don't think there is one yet. But you may be able to find it, I don't know. The British Council Core Skills Professional Development Materials, I showed the screenshot of this. They are available here. Another framework for 21st century learning that you can find on the internet is this P21 framework. And the book that I referenced near the beginning, which has taken different frameworks and integrated different frameworks, was this book here. Now, discussion questions, finally. So first, as I said, I think most of you, almost certainly, are already doing a lot of this skill development in your classroom. So the first question is, which of these skills do you already develop in your classroom and school? And can you discuss that and give specific examples? So just to bring out some of the things that you are already doing. And then which of these skills do you think are most important for students in your school to develop, and why? And then in groups, if you can make small groups with teachers of the same subject that you teach, design an activity for your subject that integrates some or all of these skills. I showed you one very simple example for maths. So design a similar kind of activity for your particular subject, for your age group. And be ready to present that activity and explain how it contributes to the development of these skills. That's all from me. I hope that was fairly clear. And good luck with the rest of your course. And I hope you enjoy it. Thank you very much. Bye.